Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 43 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 8 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is our resident Jet fan, Nick Cap. Nick, we have stuff to talk about today that revolves around the Jets, that revolves around fantasy football, a loaded news segment, which you don't always have on Tuesdays, a lot of players for the waiver wire. It's going to be a really fun Tuesday show.
Oh, yeah, big time. I love my Jets today.
Nick is loving his Jets today, and I'm loving my Seahawks because they're looking pretty good too. Anyway, fun for our teams. If this is your first time watching or listening to us, thank you so much. We do this show 4 times a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We do it on all audio streaming platforms, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Spotify. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you're watching this video, drop a like on it. We'd appreciate that. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure to like every video that you watch. Share the link with your friends. Share the channel with your friends. We'd appreciate that. We do have a fifth show every week. It's our live show, Sunday mornings, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast on Facebook and YouTube, and then Twitter's PrimeTimeFFPod. We'll be live this Sunday for Week 8, 8:30 to 9:30, right before that London game, the Jaguars versus the Broncos. Yay! It's going to be an offensive explosion, that's for sure. It's gonna be a bad one. It's gonna be one of the worst games of the season, I think, but we will talk about it this Sunday. Keep interacting with us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, PrimeTimeFFPod, Facebook, and YouTube, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Moving into the news and injury updates. Let's start off with the bad news. Breece Hall was confirmed to have a torn ACL and a meniscus injury. It looks like he's going to be out for the rest of this year and probably a couple games next year, I would think, maybe 2 games. Depends on how fast he returns, but does not look good for the start of next season, but that's a next season problem. This problem is that the Jets are down. Their running back, who I don't know where he was before this week, maybe he's running back 5 or something like that, 6. Very high. Phenomenal season so far as a rookie. It's devastating to see him go down from an NFL and fantasy football perspective. So not much more to say about that from both of us as we talked about it on yesterday's show. However, we do have an update for you that we got right before we recorded. It's probably good we recorded late today. The Jets made a trade for a running back. They traded for James Robinson, trading a conditional 6th-round pick. So Michael Carter will not be running the show over there. If you thought you got a late-run steal in Michael Carter, boy, do I tell you, you did not. At least I don't think so. So, Nick, they're your team. Talk about it first. Talk about the trade. How does this affect you as a Jets fan and fantasy football implications?
So yesterday on the show, I said word for word about Travis Etienne. I don't see much of an improvement from the running back position. I see the James Robinson of 2 years ago, who is a very stout running back, and that's what I saw in Travis Etienne. So you're telling me, in my opinion, based off that, the Jets replaced for the rest of the season Breece Hall, who, in my opinion, has been a top 5 running back this NFL year, for a guy that just 2 years ago had a top 10 fantasy season, top 10 season as a running back, on a bad organization, behind a bad offensive line. Joe Douglas is the greatest GM in the history of the NFL. You look at those last 2 drafts, you gave up a 6th-round pick, and he got an all-star running back. After Christian McCaffrey got traded for a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5, there's no doubt James Robinson had more value than that. And my guy, Joey D, he's got the big brain cells up there, making great trades. Good for Joey D. Good for us Jets today. Great win. Bad loss in Breece Hall, and Joey D comes in with the save. Now, for fantasy football, Michael Carter and James Robinson belong on every single roster. The Jets use the running backs more than any other team in football so far this year. They have been absolutely dominant through running the ball, and it's gone against elite defenses as well. They ran the ball well against the Steelers while TJ Watt was there, against the Bengals, who ranked top 3 against the run. They did it against the Broncos, who were a top 5 team against the run. And they have proven that it doesn't matter who's on the other side of that front 7. They can run the ball effectively. Was that Breece Hall, or was that the Jets and Mike LaFleur's mind? We're going to find out over these next few weeks. I think Breece Hall was great. I think he fit the scheme well. But Mike LaFleur knows how to drop that running offense. You saw it this year. You saw it last year with Michael Carter. I think that both these guys are rosterable. You're not going to know for a couple weeks on which one of these two is the league winner, but one of them is the league winner.
I'll tell you about a league winner. How about Travis Etienne? It's his backfield now.
Mm-hmm.
My crazy bold take, Nick, is
it might come true.
It's not looking so crazy because right now Travis Etienne is the ranked 19th, and he has like 11 weeks to go, 10 weeks to go. I think he has 10 weeks to go. His points per game have gone up every single week. It seems like the breakouts are coming, and he has some really bad defenses coming up after the bye week. Even before the bye week, he has Las Vegas, Kansas City, Baltimore, Detroit, Tennessee. Then he has his playoff schedule is a little rough. He does have Dallas and the Jets, but if you make it to your championship, he has Houston. That's a championship winner if you make it to Houston. So
James Robinson, Week 16, revenge game, playoffs.
Well, there you go. Anyway, it's good for every running back involved in this trade. Nick spoke about his Jets running backs. So I don't need to say anything else about that. I've been high on Travis Etienne, and I'm an Etienne owner in 2 leagues. In those 2 leagues, I was looking for a running back the last few weeks. I was trying to trade. People didn't want to trade. Some trades fell through. I was looking for a running back. I'm not looking for a running back anymore. There's no reason for me to replace Travis Etienne. There's no reason for me to trade Etienne and one of my other guys to get a running back that's maybe slightly better because I'm not going to upgrade that much. So good trade all around. Let's get some more news. We have a lot of news here, so I don't know where I want to jump to. So we're just going to go down the list. Marlon Mack signed with the Denver Broncos in his last 2 healthy seasons. He combined for over 2,000 yards. Now he is replacing Mike Boone, who is going to miss some time. To me, this signing means nothing to me because Denver rotates their running backs around, and I just don't think he's going to get used over Latavius Murray and Melvin Gordon. I don't know what your thoughts on this are, Nick, but I have no interest in Marlon Mack or any Bronco for the most part, but definitely not a third-string running back.
I do actually think he is rosterable. I know, like, the stat was there. There's a reason I put it in the notes was, like, the last 2 times we saw him were behind that Colts offensive line, and he did look very good. Kyle Shanahan picked him up, and there was no need for him after Elijah Mitchell went down. He had him on the practice squad. Jeff Wilson looked good. They still had Trey Sermon on the roster. So there was really no reason to put Marlon Mack into a starting role there. But now we're talking about Melvin Gordon, who has not been a comfortable starter. They keep benching him for Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray, who came off another team's practice squad as well. What it says to me is that they need someone that can handle high volume running and is not going to fumble the ball. So if in the next 2-3 weeks, Marlon Mack can prove that he could be that guy, I do think he's going to get an increased workload. Do I think he has the league winning upside of like the James Robinson that we spoke about or ETN, Michael Carter? No, but I do think he could have some fantasy value. I think he's someone you do need to keep your eye out on in that backfield.
All right. I'm not as high as Nick is. I don't want any part of him. More running backs. Chuba Hubbard has an ankle injury. It's a minor sprain. He could have returned if needed on Sunday. They're going to test it in practice this week. It looks like he'll be good to go, but that's one we'll have to monitor as the week goes on. Also for the Panthers, PJ Walker has announced the start as of now, regardless of Baker's injury in week 8. DK Metcalf got a good report back from his knee. It does not need surgery. It's a patellar tendon injury. Pete Carroll said it could be an old injury that was never kind of handled and could have re-aggravated it. DK does want to practice on Wednesday, which I think is nuts, but there's no timeline officially if he's going to miss time or not. I'm not super worried about this. He might miss this week. I should probably look up their schedule because I don't know when their bye is. I'm curious about that one. Let's see. Seahawks schedule. This week, I know they have the Giants, and they don't have it next week. Their bye is in... looks like 4 weeks. So DK does not get the bye. He could miss against the Giants this week and then could return next week against Arizona. That's my thought as somebody who knows nothing about medical stuff. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but it is positive news at least.
No, yeah, it's definitely positive. I mean, DK owners should be thankful that it wasn't the Breece Hall news. Like, End of story. Carted off early, ruled out early. Same thing that happened with Breece, and he got the positive report. So good for him. Good for that whole Seattle organization and your DK owners.
Daniel Bellinger, eye injury. It's a fracture around the eye socket and the septum. It will require surgery. He's going to miss time. This sucks because it was a Giants pass catcher we were starting to rely on a little bit, and tight ends are tough to find. So that sucks. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a concussion that was never a concussion. That's what I got. He never had a concussion. He was pulled out by somebody in the booth. I believe. Dan Campbell.
It was the third party person. I guess I don't know what it's going to go
It's the
down
Dolphin rule. It's a Dolphin
I think
rule.
it's going to be called the Tua rule.
It's the Tua rule. That's what it is.
You got Tua ruled out.
Yep, his 1.7 fantasy points on my starting lineup got ruled out. Mr. Limited was limited with a hamstring injury day to day, trending in the right direction according to Nathaniel Hackett. We'll see what happens on Sunday if he's going to play against the Jaguars in London. This is a fun one. Matt Ryan has a grade 2 shoulder sprain, but not just that. He's no longer the starter. Sam Ehlinger, horns down over there in Indianapolis. He's going to be the starter now, the rest of the season, apparently. And apparently also, Matt Ryan was not going to be the starter after this week, no matter if he was injured or not. I don't know what this means for the Colts, but if I'm Michael Pittman, if I'm seeing Elijah Moore request a trade, I'm going to request a trade too when I've had a 1,000-yard season under my belt. I don't know why Pittman would want to be there at this point, but I don't know how this is going to affect the team as a whole. I know that young quarterbacks like to target tight ends. I know they wanted to get, what's his name involved? The tight end over there. Do you remember his name off the top of your head?
It's not Mo Alley Cox. It's another big dude. It's a dude that's bigger than Mo Alley Cox. I forget his name.
Yeah, it's hold on, I have ESPN. It's Jelani Woods. They want to get Jelani Woods involved more. So maybe Jelani Woods or maybe Mo Alley Cox. Somebody's going to be the favorite target over there for Sam Ehlinger, I think. Hopefully they rely on Jonathan Taylor. But your thoughts about this? I know you've been high on Pittman and Alec Pierce. I think this is downgrades because we just don't know what you're going to get from Sam Ehlinger.
No, it's definitely downgrades for receiver. I think Jonathan Taylor gets the biggest boost here. I was listening to Pat McAfee talk about this move, and it was very entertaining, as Pat McAfee is. But he said something that Frank Reich loves to do is simplify his offense when he has a young quarterback in there. And as a player that played for him, Pat McAfee is going to know it better than anyone there. He said simplified offense. That's exactly what you are going to see. You're going to see check downs to running backs. You're going to see hand the ball off. You're going to see that 20 carry Jonathan Taylor game with the 7-8 targets. You're going to see that Christian McCaffrey workload come through. I think right now, when people are going to be extremely scared of Jonathan Taylor, this is going to be the last chance you have to buy him right now. I think you should make every.
I don't think he's sellable. I don't think people are going to sell him now. I think the time to buy him was 3 weeks ago when he was hurt.
You don't think people are going to sell him with a backup rookie quarterback coming in for the first time?
People are stingy with their first round picks, man. If you drafted him number 1 overall, it's really tough to say I'm going to sell him. I tried to. I tried in 2 or 3 leagues, and people didn't want to trade him without getting like a star in return.
If I had viewed as a star, if I had someone like DeAndre Swift, I would look to go trade for him.
Yeah. All right. Well, Swift doesn't have a lot of value right now at all.
Neither does
I think you would have to trade like Travis Etienne and somebody else.
I don't know. I don't think it's going to cost as much as people think.
I wish you were right, but I have tried to look to trade for him and it hasn't worked. Last injury update, Mike Williams has a high ankle sprain. He is going to miss some time. The Chargers do have a bye week, and then they have a really easy schedule coming out. My big takeaway is to pick up Joshua Palmer, who is going to come off a concussion and will probably play after the bye, and Mike Williams probably won't.
Just real quick on Palmer, because I've been the biggest. I knew Joshua Palmer was going to boom before anyone knew Joshua Palmer's name. Josh Palmer, they said 2 years ago, Mike Williams is not healthy enough. We are not giving him a contract. Josh Palmer is going to replace his role the following year. They were very candid about it. This is the opportunity where Joshua Palmer is going to step into that role. The only role Palmer has been able to step into has been Keenan Allen's, and that's not his role. The type of receiver in the arc he has is a very similar build to Mike Williams. He's a big receiver that can get up there, that can go down the field and get you a 30, 40-yard catch. I absolutely agree with Nick. Josh Palmer is a must own in 80% of leagues coming off the bye week.
It also depends on how serious the high ankle sprain is. It could be 4 weeks, could be 2 weeks, but we'll see what happens. I also want to note, we're recording Monday night, and the Bears are up 10-0. That's really bad for my Patriots -7.5 spread in my spread pool.
Is Mac Jones the starter?
You know what? Yes, he's number 10, isn't he? I think he is.
He is, baby goat.
All right. Moving on to the waiver wire. I'm sure we're going to talk about Joshua Palmer. Maybe we already did. Anyway, quarterbacks on the waiver wire that we like, or, well, maybe we like. Players. Jared Goff at 47%. Daniel Jones, 28%. I personally favor Daniel Jones because the Giants are winning football games, even against good football teams, and Jared Goff can't beat good football teams. So that's my preference here.
I agree. I have the preference for Daniel Jones, but I do like Jared Goff rest of season. Next week he has Miami, then he has Green Bay. 2 tough weeks in Chicago, then Giants, then Buffalo. Then he gets Jacksonville, Minnesota. The last 2 weeks of the season, there's your championship and week before the championship at Carolina, who I know they looked good against the Buccaneers, but have not looked that good all season. And then you have
That was a
Chicago at
dumb
home.
game. That was just a dumb game.
I do think Jared Goff is going to have a lot of upside come down the stretch.
All right. Some running backs, Gus Edward at 16%, and these are what they're owned in ESPN standard leagues. Dante Foreman at 35%, Chuba Hubbard at 25%, Tyler Algier at 30%, Marlon Mack at 1%, Latavius Murray 20%, Isaiah Pacheco 14%. All 14 of that percent is probably Sunday morning pickups. Kyron Williams at 8.4% and Rashad White at 20%. All right, Nick. Who would be your top 3 running backs that you like out of this bunch?
Number 1 is going to be Gus Edwards. I think Gus Edwards is the must own of the bunch. He got the clear RB1 workload out of all of those guys over there. He was super effective. He was incredibly good. Did not look like he was coming off an injury. I think Gus is going to be a very good play moving forward. Number 2, I am going to roll out with Deontay Foreman. I do think Chuba Hubbard did look well, and he did outsnap him. But when Deontay Foreman was out on the field, he had a higher routes run and he had higher usage. So I could see Deontay Foreman taking over in that backfield. I can't see both being effective most weeks. It's going to be matchup dependent. And then my number 3 would be Rashad White. I think he had a 43% snap share this week. It was the highest that he had all season. When they were trailing, he was out in those passing routes, and Brady loves checking down to running backs. You saw it with Leonard Fournette. You saw it with James White, Rex Burkhead. You could go through a list of running backs that he's had in the past where he just repeatedly checks the ball down to them. I think those are the 3 guys I want to own in every league.
I thought you were going to say Rashad White, and that's something to talk about, but those are the 3 that I would also want at this point. So there you go. Moving on to wide receivers, Paris Campbell broke out this week, only owned in 3% of leagues. Odell Beckham Jr. Nick's been screaming for it, 20% of leagues. Marquise Goodwin is owned in less than 1% of leagues. The thing with Goodwin is he had a really good week this week, 2 touchdowns and like 4 or 5 targets. If DK is out for this week or an extended period of time, he's a good waiver pickup. If DK is not out, then it's a different story. So he probably wouldn't be high on my list, but it's one to mention. Darius Slayton owned in under 1% of leagues. That one kind of surprises me. Elijah Moore, 50% of leagues, and Joshua Palmer, 26%. I think Palmer's going to be my number 1 waiver pick on the week. Maybe he's a bye this week, so maybe my 2nd or 3rd, but he's up there for me. So, Nick, you already spoken about Joshua Palmer. If he's in your top 2, then that's fine. But who would be your top 2 or 3 for receivers?
Palmer would be my number 1. I would have Elijah Moore at 2. He's been dropped in a lot of leagues, but Corey Davis is now hurt. They're going to probably force Elijah Moore to get out on that football field, and I do think he's going to see a lot more workload coming. And if not, he's going to get traded before the deadline. I know Joe Douglas said we don't want to trade him, but the fact is, if he's hurting that locker room and that team is on a high, Robert Saleh says all gas, no breaks. If you're giving him breaks, Joey D's getting you out of that locker room. And then my number 3 would be Odell. I do think he has league-winning upside. I gave the stats last year, but when he came in for the Rams, off the top of my head, in the 7 or 8 games he played, he had 5 touchdowns. He had, I think, close to 400 or 500 yards in that span. Those are pretty much league-winning numbers on a guy that you're going to get off the waiver wire. I do think he's worth the stash if you have a competitive team.
I think I completely agree. I'm not super duper high on Elijah Moore, but Palmer for sure. So that's one to monitor. I think Darius Slayton's another one. He has over 6 targets in 2 of the last 3 weeks and over double-digit fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 weeks. So that's another one I think you could look to stash. Tight ends, Jawan Johnson on New Orleans owned in 3% of leagues. Greg Dulcich in 8% of leagues, taking over that Albert O role. Hayden Hurst owned in 47% of leagues, and Evan Ingram in 33% of leagues. I've been beating the drum for Evan Ingram for a couple of weeks now. I think he has, I'm going to look it up just so I have the exact stats in front of me, but he does have, so in the last 6 weeks, he has over 9 fantasy points in 4 out of the last 6. His targets have increased. He's had over 6 targets in his last 3 games. Doesn't have the touchdowns yet, but he's getting the targets. He's getting the looks from Trevor, and the touchdowns are going to come. So don't love the matchup this week against Denver. That is a tough matchup. But then he has Vegas, Kansas City, Baltimore, Detroit, Tennessee. He's got a lot of easy matchups. So I think that's one that if you're carrying like a Kyle Pitts like me, I think that's one you could go and get.
I do like the Evan Ingram take, but I do think I'm going to lean on the other tight end in that game, Greg Dulcich. His first week back from the injury, he caught the long touchdown. But this past week, he had 9 targets. You don't see 9 targets to a tight end often. It was his second game of his career. So if he's getting that kind of workload that early, I do think that there's a lot of upside moving forward. Russell Wilson in Seattle did like using his tight ends for those touchdowns. I remember a lot of Gerald Everett and Will Dissly robbing some touchdowns from DK and Lockett. And you might know that better being the Seattle fan, but I do remember seeing that a lot on Red Zone. So I do like Dulcich moving forward on that list.
So with that said, who would be your top 5 waiver targets for week 8?
I think number 1 has to be Gus Edwards. It's so rare that this late in the season you can get a starting running back on an elite rushing offense. I think for me, he's the clear-cut one. I don't think anyone else on this list has the league-winning upside that he does.
I think we're going to have the same top 3, I guess.
I'm sorry?
I think we're going to have the same top 3. Who's your 2?
Probably my number 2 would then be Joshua Palmer. I know he's going into the bye week, but once he comes out of it and that team gets healthy, I mean, you got 3 weeks with a healthier Justin Herbert who hasn't looked the same since the rib injury. He's taking over that Mike Williams role. If he takes over Mike Williams' workload, I mean, the sky's the limit. Mike Williams was a 3rd or a 4th round fantasy draft pick for a reason, and he's put up the numbers to back that as well. And my number 3, I would probably go Deontay Foreman, especially if Chuba Hubbard is missing time. He's going to have to take on the RB1 workload on a team that had no problem moving the ball. I do think PJ Walker was the better option than Baker and Darnold. Said it 2 weeks ago, thought it would be 2 weeks ago, didn't think it would be against the number 1 defense in football. So if he's doing that against Tampa, we'll see what they can do moving forward in easier matchups.
What about your last 2 if you're doing 5?
After that, I'd go for the Elijah Moore. I do think he's too talented not to sit on the waiver wire. And I do think that they are going to force him out on that football field this week. And my number 5 would probably be depending on what you need. If you have a competitive team, you're 5-2, 6-1, 7-0. I'm going for Odell. I'm stashing him. If you need the tight end, go for Greg Dulcich. If you need the quarterback, go for Jared Goff. So just
I think that's a good way to go about it. I would go Gus Edwards, Deontay Foreman, Joshua Palmer, Rashad White, and then Evan Ingram. That would be my top 5. Going on to stash or trash, if you're going to pick up some of these guys off the waiver wire, you're going to have to send some of your players to the trash. And if you have a deep team, like I have some deep teams, it's tough to cut some guys. So we're going to tell you which guys it's time to put up to the dumpster. First off, Romeo Doubs owned in 57% of leagues, 0 for 4 on targets. It's like a baseball number. It sounds like a Yankee number when it comes to strikeouts.
You want to know who put that stat line up earlier this year? On a team that has a good offense that didn't look great week 1?
Who?
Devontae Smith. Since then, he's been averaging over 15 fantasy points per game. I'm not saying Romeo Doubs is going to do that, but you don't bench the arguable wide receiver 1 for the back-to-back MVP quarterback.
I think he's droppable. I mean, last 3 weeks, 5 points, 6 points, and 0. I think and a matchup against Buffalo this week. I think if you drop them, nobody's scooping him up. I think he's droppable. You can get one of these guys. Robert Woods owned in 60% of leagues.
I've been saying it for weeks. I don't see him being. I don't understand why
the Titans don't pass enough. What about 49ers running backs not named Christian McCaffrey? Jeff Wilson didn't look bad. If Christian McCaffrey wasn't there, he would have boomed them. I'm certain about that.
Oh, we had some breaking news. Bailey Zappi has replaced Mac Jones.
I didn't mean to mention that. Who just scored though? Is it Jacoby Myers? That would really suck if it was. Was it Jacoby Myers?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Anyway, I think that I would stash both of them. Like I've said, Christian McCaffrey is going into a great offense, but an injury-prone overall football team, a physical football team. those running backs have sustained massive injuries. You could look at, for the last 5 years under Kyle Shanahan, all those guys have got missed significant time. I mean, Raheem Mostert, 3 snaps into the game last season, winded up going out for, I think, the rest of the year. So I would still stash Elijah Mitchell as a handcuff. I ranked him very high before the year when he was healthy, because I do think there's a lot of talent in that offense. So I think he's probably one of the 2 or 3 best handcuff running backs in football.
Mac Jones is never getting this job back. That's for sure. Anyway, Mac
to the Colts? I'm going to call that now.
Maybe. I do agree with you on that. I wouldn't cut a 49ers running back just yet, knowing how made of glass McCaffrey can be at times. What are they ruling here? They're almost ruling as if he's down. I hope he's down. I hope he's down because, he may be down. I don't know. I hope he's down because I really don't need that touchdown against me in a close matchup. Yeah, it's a touchdown. Fuck. I'm gonna really sweat out the next 7 points that might be had against me. All right. Hunter Renfrow owned in 67% of leagues.
I would still stash him. They came off the bye. He was hurt going into the week with a hip injury. Like, I don't think I would cut him yet.
I think I'm okay cutting him for one of these guys because he's the 3rd receiving option on a run-first team.
That's true. I would take Gus Edwards over.
And as long as Josh Jacobs is healthy, I just don't know how much they pass. Like, why would you? The guy's averaging 130 yards per game in the last 4. Here's one. I don't think this is a drop, but I think it's somebody people are going to be upset about. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 93%, who lost the starting role this week, apparently.
I still wouldn't cut him. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco was the starting running back, and he barely got any carries. Like, I just think Kansas City doesn't run often enough, and he has been the red zone running back. So
this is why I didn't really want Pacheco when we talked about it on our Sunday morning show. They don't run the ball enough, and when they do run the ball, they have a committee over there. They're a nightmare for running backs, just like Buffalo is. You just don't want to own one. I don't know.
I completely agree. And if Jerick McKinnon or Isaiah Pacheco goes down, I mean, Clyde is going to take over, at least half their workload. He's going to see over 50% snap share on the number 1 offense in football. Yep. I can't justify cutting him yet, but I do think he is someone to watch moving forward.
Chase Edmonds at 53%. I'm so ready to let him go. I mean, there's only so many handcuffs you could hold on to at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's better handcuffs out there. It's not worth rostering him.
How about Brandon Cooks at 92%?
I won't cut him yet, but I don't feel comfortable playing him if I own him.
You shouldn't have felt comfortable the entire year. This is why I wouldn't draft him. Michael Gallup, 59%, a nice goose egg.
He was out-snapped and out-targeted by Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz.
It's a run-first team. It's a run-first team.
Very, very, very crowded offense over there.
Don't want him.
I do think I'd cut him for someone like Gus Edwards or Palmer or one of those guys.
How about AJ Brown at 80? AJ Dillon at 82%. Not AJ Brown. You're not cutting AJ Brown. 82% for AJ Dillon, who hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points in 6 weeks.
I hate to say it, but I mean,
You have
to look at who's on the board, and Gus Edwards and Deontay Foreman, I would rather play on a week-to-week basis.
If AJ Dillon is your worst player, then yes, but I think you have a worse player on your roster.
I mean, I'm going to list 4 running backs that are in our waiver wire I'd rather roster at this point. Gus Edwards, Deontay Foreman, Kyron Williams, Rashad White. I'd rather own all 4.
In our waiver wire or in our league's waiver wire?
On who we have right
on
here.
On the PrimeTime Fantasy waiver wire, yes, but I just feel like AJ Dillon, if you own him, I feel like you have to own somebody worse than him on your team that you could cut.
Maybe.
If you have to, like if he's really your worst player, maybe you have a really good team, then yes, cut him. But I just think there's worse players out there. Finally, Drake London at 87% hasn't cracked double-digit fantasy points in, I think, 4 weeks.
I want Cordell Patterson to get back because I hate Cordell Patterson. Like, I hate talking about him. He's my least favorite player outside of the Bengals. You
love the Bengals.
We didn't talk about a single Bengal today outside
Nick,
of Hayden Hurst.
Hold on. I have a good bet idea for us. I think we should rally up all our bets that we have on the season, and whoever gets more bets wrong has to purchase a shirtsy of the other person's choice and wear it on the show. So like a player that you really don't like, that you didn't like talking about this season, you have to wear it on the last show of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast for season 2. I think this is a great idea. So I'd love to see you in a nice Jamar Chase bright orange shirt.
I don't even know who I'd get for you. Who does Nick? Who would be like the player you hate the most that would be on there?
A Bronco. It would have to be a Bronco, I think. I think it would have to be Melvin Gordon. I think it would have to be Melvin Gordon.
All right, let's do it. Screw it. That'll be a good time.
If anybody wants to run through our episodes and gather up all our bets,
we'll get our moderator Joe to do it.
That's his unpaid homework of the week. This is going to be hilarious. I like this one. All right, I didn't mean to cut you up. You were talking about Hayden Hurst and
like I said, Drake London or Cordell Patterson when he gets back from the injury. In the 3 games Cordell Patterson played, Drake London had double-digit fantasy points. They got the ball down the field. He was the leading red zone target on the team. So I do need to see him back, which is baffling that I even have to say that. But like I've been saying about him and Pitts, like there's going to
he's the heartbeat of the offense.
There is
he's
no
the heartbeat over there.
There's no point moving forward trusting either of them in your lineup. So I do think if you have a Gus Edwards there and Drake London somehow is the worst player in your team, like I would do that. Anyone else on this list? Probably not.
My dad a few years ago had a really good fantasy football team, and if he became in second or whatever, you got a gag gift. So his gag gift one year was a Jamal Charles shirt because Jamal Charles scored like 4 touchdowns against him and he got bounced when he had the best team in the league. So I think this bet idea is great. Anyway, that is Stash or Trash. Hopefully helped you guys out with your waiver wire and the players that you should be dropping. If you enjoyed the show and you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, please drop a like on this video. We would appreciate that. Share that link with your friends. Tell your friends. We'd appreciate all that as well. Remember to set your waiver wires tonight, guys. I think it's at like midnight they reset or something, but just set them while you listen to the show. Set them when you park if you're listening in the car. You don't want to miss out on the waiver wire this week. There's not going to be many superstar waiver wires after this one. It's actually been a really crappy season for the waiver wire. A lot of fantasy analysts have noted that. But got to do what you got to do. So enjoy your Tuesday. Hopefully you get the guys you want on the waiver wire. Make sure you set them, and we'll talk to you guys on Thursday.